Are you currently confusing temporary morale boosts with the conditions that build trust, connection, and commitment on your teams? Odds are you are, but only because the concept of employee engagement is not as intuitively simple as it sounds. It's not about making employees happy. Organizations and its managers do not exist to do this. And making employees happy doesn't even mean they're engaged to begin with. We continue to see attempts to ensure employees have enjoyable moments at work, assuming those improve attitudes towards work. But we don't call it happiness, we call it engagement. But this term continues to have organizations in a metaphorical chokehold. We treat employee engagement as a moment, an activity, or event, but the mandatory fund is costing your organization hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars every single year. These attempts at engaging the workforce are understandable because understanding true employee engagement is understanding human behavior, and humans are complicated. But any organization that wants to create environments that lead to high performance and better outcomes should focus on the entire employee experience to drive employee engagement. Focusing on engagement shouldn't wait until you see problems because by then, reversing the disengagement is hard. So, we're going to talk about what employee engagement actually is, why it's misunderstood, and what you can do about it. Because these are things within your control, and that's where we're going to focus. Now, I recently did something that both frustrated and fascinated me by going online and scrolling through some of the more popular forums where employees and leaders talk about the problems they face at work. When reading about posts about employee engagement, the conversations were entirely about activities. One manager asked whether organizations do employee engagement well and what activities they do. It had so many likes and comments. People were giving suggestions, and there were lots of responses about happy hours and wellness challenges. And I'm not saying those things are bad. They can be wonderful, but they're not employee engagement. They're activities. And we can't reduce employee engagement to simple perks because then we fundamentally miss what it is. The concept of engagement took off in the early 90s. There was a lot of research around motivation, organizational behavior, and what really drives human performance at work. And at its core, the research said something pretty profound. It said that people invest effort, and I mean real discretionary extra effort, when they are fully engaged and when three things are true. One, they feel like the work is meaningful, like it's worth it. Two, they feel psychologically safe to speak up, to take risks. I talked a little bit about psychological safety in my last video. And three, they feel available, meaning they feel capable and have the resources they need to actually do the work. Meaningfulness, safety, availability. Not pizza, not a ping pong table in the break room, though they're fun. But somewhere along the lines, that got lost, and employee engagement got warped and reduced to fleeting rah rah moments. It may have been due to the absence of proper change management, the kind of real intentional, sustained effort to embed this concept of employee engagement deep into organizational culture. But it just got thrown out there, and people ran with their version of it. It's been rebranded, renamed, repackaged more times than I can count. But yet, at its core, the misunderstanding still persists. Because if we don't understand the heart of employee engagement, no amount of rebranding is going to fix it. It has been estimated that employees' disengagement costs organizations hundreds of millions of dollars every year. One study calculated this loss at over $350 million dollars annually for some of the world's largest organizations. That's a crushing number. Then, when you think about small and medium sized businesses, the impact of disengaged employees grows exponentially. You may not be losing 350 million, but the proportional damage to your operations, your quality, or your customer service, it can be devastating. According to Gallup, 17% of the global workforce is actively disengaged. In the United States, that's 18%. Employees who are actively disengaged are not simply disengaged. Active disengagement means that employees are actively working against the interest of the team and the organization. They spread negativity, they undermine peers and leaders, and they damage productivity in a number of ways. But more concerning than that is that 14% of managers are actively disengaged, meaning they're checked out and working against the goals of the organization. And when Gallup also tells us that managers account for 70% of the variance in team level engagement, that simply means that when comparing engagement across teams, it's been found that most of the gaps can be explained by the manager's impact on the team. It does not mean that pay, workload, culture, or life stresses outside of work don't matter. It also doesn't mean that a manager can magically fix a broken company. It does mean that managers have an outsized effect on the engagement outcomes of teams. And that should really shift how we think about who we put into leadership roles, or more specifically, management roles. There's a difference, and we conflate the two often, and I'll talk about that more in another video in the future. So, 1 in 2 employees has left a job because of their managers. 1 in 2. Sit with that for a minute. So, if engagement isn't about happiness or activities, what is it? And at its foundation, employee engagement is about psychological presence versus physical presence. Employees can be physically sitting at their desk or on the floor in the meeting, but be completely absent psychologically. And it shows. It shows up in the quality of work, how someone interacts with customers. It shows up in whether your employees go the extra mile or they do the bare minimum. The early research described it this way: people use varying degrees of themselves at work, and when someone is truly engaged, they are bringing their full selves to work. They are present mentally, emotionally, and behaviorally. And that's not to say that life outside of work cannot contribute to how employees show up at work. But even when employees are carrying stress beyond the workplace, organizations still have a choice whether or not they add to the burden. We can reduce avoidable friction and help employees perform well despite all that they might be experiencing. And when people are fully engaged, you see it everywhere. Customer service improves, quality goes up, productivity rises, attendance issues drop, safety incidents decrease, turnover goes down, even theft has been shown to go down. Customer loyalty also increases because your customers are connecting with people who genuinely are invested in the success of the organization. Now, engagement is not a mood. Moods change from day to day. Engagement is much, much deeper. Frills and perks might contribute to engagement and they might even create retention, but those things cannot wholly drive employee engagement. And do you really want to retain disengaged employees? It might be better to engage them in the first place. Engagement is actually the outcome of the employee experience across the entire employee lifecycle, from hiring through separation. I'll be breaking some of these key experience down in future videos, so give me a follow if you're interested in learning more. So, engagement is continually shaped by the conditions around the employees, not by whether there's cake in the break room. Who doesn't love cake, though? What's also important to understand is that employee engagement as a concept does not exist by itself. It's connected to so many well established theories around motivation, career choice, behavior. And when you look across all of them, the patterns are really consistent. People need autonomy, they want to feel competent, and they want to feel like they belong. They need to see the connection between their effort and the outcomes, which aren't radical ideas. They're foundational to how human beings operate, and they connect directly to what engages employees. Something else I want to address is the tendency to label people who may not be fully engaged. They may be called lazy. It may be said that they lack motivation, that they're not a good culture fit. I want to challenge that because real engagement, or the lack of it, is about whether the conditions have been created for people to do meaningful work, to show up as their full selves and contribute to something that's greater than themselves. So before we label someone, let's ask if we created the conditions for them to be successful. Are we blaming the individual for organizational failures? And I want to be clear about something. Disengagement is often a rational response to what is happening. When expectations are unclear, when there are no decision rights, when there's constant change and no change support, When there's a big disconnect between how hard someone's working and how they're rewarded, disengagement isn't laziness, it is survival. The research around engagement described it as a person defending their physical, emotional, and mental state, basically protecting themselves. So when we reframe it that way, we start asking different questions that help to truly drive change. There is another side of this that's just as important, and that's burnout. Burnout and disengagement are different. Someone who is highly engaged can absolutely burn out. And in fact, your most engaged employees are often the most at risk, especially when working amongst disengaged peers. Think about it. You have someone who's deeply committed, who's pouring their full selves into their role, but they're surrounded by people who are disengaged, or they're working under a leader who is not creating conditions for engagement. That person is carrying a disproportionate load. And over time, that's unsustainable. So without the right structures and support systems in place, engagement cannot sustain. And your most valuable people burn out and eventually leave. And now you've lost the best because you didn't address the conditions around them. This is a design issue. It's systemic, and it goes back to the structures and systems that are in our organizations. There was a cartoon that I remember vividly that I saw years ago. It was a comic strip that had 4 panels showing different versions of a swing. The first panel showed what the CEO thought employees wanted: elaborate, over the top, maybe overlooking a scenic vista, something lavish. The second showed what the VP thought employees wanted: something different, maybe a tire swing. The third panel showed what the frontline manager thought employees wanted: yet another version of a swing. And then the fourth panel, what the employees actually wanted: a simple wooden swing, 2 ropes hanging from a tree, functional, practical. And I think that cartoon says everything about where organizations go wrong with engagement. We sit in boardrooms and conference rooms making decisions about what we think employees need. We design programs and initiatives based on assumptions, and then we're confused when engagement doesn't improve. Getting to know what employees actually need is not optional, but is foundational to the plan. And that's why the direct manager role is so critical. Not because they're personal gurus or life coaches, because they are best positioned to know their teams, their strengths, their hopes, their quirks, what frustrates them. And when you have the understanding, you can help create the experience that actually engages them. But you cannot survey your way out of structural dysfunction. You cannot throw training dollars at people, send them off to a course, and expect them to come back more engaged if the environment they return to hasn't changed. If anything, you've developed them to leave and take their knowledge somewhere where they feel it will be better valued. So, what do we do about all of this? First, I want to reframe something. Disengagement is not a permanent state. It's not a death sentence for your organization, but it is something that can be turned around. It just requires critical honesty and intentionality. Are there external factors that contribute to less than stellar organizational performance? Absolutely. But I'm a firm believer in controlling what you can control. And these are things that you can control, which is the engagement of your team and subsequently organizational performance. Let's start by looking at data you already have: performance data, employee engagement data, your on time delivery, customer complaints, membership signups, your sales pipeline. If these numbers are trending in the wrong direction, ask yourself, what role has the organization played in this? What conditions have we created or failed to create that might be driving this performance? Then take the conversation to the people and ask the questions, but only if you are committed to doing something with what you hear. If you are committed to investing in what's being asked, including time and energy and not just dollars, and if you are committed to deepening your understanding so that everyone is speaking the same language. Because nothing erodes trust faster than asking for feedback and then doing nothing with it. If you are measuring employee engagement, if you're running surveys and you're not acting on what your employees are telling you, or at the very least communicating why you're not acting on it, please stop surveying. You're doing more harm than good. Your teams need clear priorities. They need to be recognized. They need to hear what's going right and not just what's going wrong. Communication has to flow and not be siloed. And we need to rethink how we select, train, and support our managers because getting the right people in those roles and equipping them to succeed is not a nice to have. Now, I want to be honest with you. It's not something that happens overnight. This is change. And even if you remove a poor leader today, the system that allowed that person to operate still exists. The structures, the norms, the culture, it takes sustained, intentional effort to change, but it's worth it. The more engaged your teams are, the more they feel like they can bring themselves to work, contribute meaningfully, and achieve their goals. Then the less you have to worry about people working against your organizational goals. So, yes, continue doing the fun things. Offer the free goodies, investing in teams, having a good time at work. Just remember that icing tastes a whole lot better on cake than it does on a sour pickle. All right. So here's your assignment for this week. And if you've been watching my videos, you know I always leave you with something practical because this only matters if you do something with it. This week, I want you to do two things. One, after taking an honest inventory of how your organization is really approaching employee engagement, whether you're relying on activities or surveys, I want you to look at some data, some metrics that are important to you and your team and identify if there are numbers that are trending in the wrong direction. Are there goals that are trending in the wrong direction? What are things that are standing out to you? Then take 1 to 2 of those things and identify what of those may be rooted in employee engagement or lack thereof. Then I want you to have one real conversation. Pick a person on your team, a direct report, a frontline manager, anyone, and have a no agenda conversation, not a performance check in, not following up on a survey, but just ask what's working, what's not working, where are you getting stuck, what do you need, and then listen. What's important to note here is that trust plays a major part in how honest the responses you receive will be. If you want to spend a little time building trust first, check out my previous video and the guided trust reflection that's linked there. So, if you find that a one on one conversation might fall flat or people might be too fearful, you might consider a skip level where leaders connect with employees who report to the managers in their organizations, essentially skipping a level or a small focus group. There's sometimes power in numbers. I will have a tool linked in the description to help you work through this more deeply. But start with those two things this week. Come back and tell me how it went. If you found this valuable, like this video, subscribe, share it with someone who you think might need it, and drop a comment below. I want to hear from you. What's been your experience with employee engagement? What's working? What's not? And if you're an organizational leader or a senior HR leader who is ready to stop treating engagement like a party planning exercise and start treating it like the strategic driver that it actually is, you're in the right place. I've got a lot more coming, and I'll see you in the next one.